بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم، لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم، له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه، يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم، ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء، وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض، ولا يعوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. Your second salawat for love of the Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. And the third for Sahib al-Asr wa zaman. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected elders and brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today our conversation takes us to the doorstep of Tawheed. And this Ayat al-Kursi, which is known as the second most powerful section of the Quran after Surah Al-Fatiha, is one such that talks extensively and excessively about the ma'rifat and understanding of Allah. And it is this ayah that our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that there is not a man who has accepted the faith of Islam or a man who is born into Islam, except that he does not let 24 hours go without the recitation of this Ayat al-Kursi. Meaning he's telling us the significance of this ayat is such that we should ensure that it becomes a part of our day-to-day, that a mu'min, a Muslim, is not someone who would let 24 hours go without the recitation of this verse. Meaning it's that significant for us that we take advantage of it. Now, as we start our conversation on Tawheed, this topic of Tawheed and understanding the oneness of Allah is very important. And understanding Allah is so important. There's a very powerful riwayah from our Holy Prophet where he says, لَوْ أَعْرَفْتُمُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ مَعْرِفَتِهِ لَمَشَيْتُمْ عَلَى الْبُحُورِ وَلَزَالَتْ بِدُعَائِكُمْ الْجِبَالِ. If you understood Allah by the right that He has, by the right of which He should be understood, you would walk on water, you would walk on the seas, and mountains would crumble by your dua. Yani, look at the power. We're not even talking about nabuwwat. We haven't gotten to nabuwwat, we haven't gotten to imamat, we haven't got... Just the idea of understanding Allah and thinking about Allah is such a powerful concept that if you understood the right of Allah, you would walk on water. If you understood the right of Allah, you would make dua and a mountain would crumble before you. This Quran, this is the month of Quran. And it's very important that we take advantage of this month and recite the Quran in this month. There's a narration from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Says it's not strange that a mu'min should recite 100 verses of Quran and tell a rock to explode and it would be destroyed by his command. This is the power of the Quran itself too. The Quran contains much power where it can raise our individual ability to a much higher ability because it opens our hearts and understandings to Allah. When we look at the verses of Quran, we hear and we understand and we learn about Allah. In this way, our first question comes, does God exist? And this is a question that either we are asked, or our children ask, or we have within our hearts that we need to have certainty of the answer of this question within ourselves. Now, there's a few interesting ways, and the thing is, this is always a question that is approached intellectually. Why? Because a human being has a certain faculty of how to determine something is present. He uses his 5 senses. He uses his sight, he uses his smell, he uses his taste, he uses sound, and uses touch. Now, through these 5 senses, through these tools that a man is given, he comes to a conclusion that something exists. Something is present. Scientifically, the rule is the same. If we can measure it, it exists. However, what science will say is, if I can't measure it, if I can't sense it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means I don't have the ability to measure it. When we start utilizing our intellect to determine about the existence of things, this is called metaphysics. Metaphysics is using your intellect to come to a conclusion about something's existence or presence that you don't have the physical ability to touch, taste, smell, or interact with your senses. This science is typically used when, for example, scientists look at the universe. And when they take a look and they say, do other planets with life exist? Now, none of us have been there. None of us can see the planets that are so far away. None of us can utilize our hands and our feet and our eyes and our ears to hear other people or see other people or to go to these planets. So what scientists do is they use their intellect. They decide that, okay, with the probability of existence and the probability of the size of the universe and what we can measure of the universe, this is how we think the universe came about. And they come up with theories. Or this is what we think of how many planets must have life on them. Or which planets, because of the signs that we can kind of measure, should have life on them. Or the things based on our intellect, we come to this conclusion. Now, this science of metaphysics also addresses and is in charge of our ability to understand the presence of God. And it helps us come to the conclusion of whether Allah is there or not there. Now, there are some very, very high theoretical concepts that we could get into and we could spend days and days and days, and either you would fall asleep or I would fall asleep, or you would cry or I would cry because of the length of the discussion. Especially when everyone is fasting, it's a very difficult concept to kind of get into. So we'll recite a really loud salawat and move past that area. I'm glad you're with me, otherwise if the salawat was soft, I would have assumed you want to talk about these topics and then we would have had to start a long discussion. Rather than go to that side of the metaphysical theories and the presentation of intellectual arguments on the presence that are then combated between people who believe in creationism or atheists and theists, let's look at another example. The problem with why people even contest the idea of is there a God or not is because the world is too big for them to comprehend. Let me give you an example. If I was to tell you that this light on the ceiling here came into creation on its own and came about on its own, would you believe me? No. You would say, no, I can tell by its design, its functionality, the fact that there's electrical wiring in here that turns on the light bulbs. Someone had to first design the metal of it, then had to put the wires in it, then had to hang the crystals on it, then had to screw in the light bulbs, then had to wire it to a source of electricity, then had to make sure electricity, fulan and fulan. Why? You were able to take the scope of this item and understand what it takes to create this item. Because it's something that is within your capacity to understand. It's impossible for you to say that this object came about on its own. The problem that we have is when we take a look at the world with all of the variables that are present in the world, all of the different intricacies that are present in the world, it's so big and encompassing, we have a hard time believing that anyone could have the power and ability to create it. I'll give you an example. In the time of Al-Mahilli, there came a famous atheist from Greece. And he came from the Roman Empire. He came to the Khalifa of Iran, the king of Iran at the time. And he said, I am the greatest of atheists. You Muslims claim there is a God. Send someone to debate me that I can show and demonstrate to you that God does not exist. So the king of that time, he knew that Al-Mahilli is a very powerful debater, is a very intellectual scholar. Al-Mahilli, as we know, is credited for making the country of Iran Shia. He is the one who took the responsibility and converted the whole nation to believe in the Ahlul Bayt and Allah and structured their faith correctly. So the king, he calls for Al-Mahilli and he says, listen, Al-Mahilli, I've set a debate for Saturday at 8 p.m. or 4 o'clock, whatever the time was. Saturday, 4 o'clock, let's say. Please be here to debate this atheist. Al-Mahilli received the letter, said, okay, I'll be there. So now hearing about this, all the people, they went to the court and they gathered at 4 o'clock, and the atheist came and he sat in his chair all, respectful and everything. And 4 o'clock came, the court is full of people, everyone is sitting there watching and waiting. No Al-Mahilli. He doesn't come. The atheist sits there, 4:30 comes, he doesn't come, 4:45 comes, he doesn't come, 5 o'clock comes, 5:30. 5:30 someone says, I see Hilli coming, Hilli is coming, Hilli is coming. Al-Mahilli comes at 5:30 for a debate that was set at 4 o'clock. The atheist is offended, the king is curious as to why. So when Al-Mahilli enters the court and he takes his seat and he sits down and he turns to the audience and he says, Bhai, now what? The king says, Ya Hilli, why were you late? Why were you late? Why didn't you come on time? So Al-Mahilli, in one single attack, finishes the whole conversation. He says, on my way here, I had to cross a river. When I got to the river, there was no boat there, so I was waiting for a boat. While I was waiting for the boat to come, a tree fell in the water. When the tree fell in the water, slowly, it started to take the shape of a boat. Once it had taken the shape of the boat, I sat in the boat, and the boat took me across to the other side, and that's why I'm late. Now the atheist speaks. He says, what kind of a fool do you think I am that I would believe that a boat could come about on its own and could take you across the river and bring you to this debate? Why are you lying to me and making a fool of me? Why don't you tell me why you really didn't come to the debate on time? Al-Mahilli turns to him and he says, so you're not willing to accept that a boat can come about on its own, but you're willing to accept that this whole universe with all of its laws and science and structures can come about on its own. A second salawat please, a good one, See, in this aspect, when we put things into an appropriate scale that's measurable by us, we start to realize that it's undeniable that there is a God present, that Allah is present. The problem we have is we can't handle the scale, the number of variables, the number of different things that go into the form, that someone could control all of these different aspects. We begin to think they are random by chance. We think that they just happen on their own and we are the subject of the whims of whatever happens. Sometimes we're just lucky things work out. No. There is someone who controls all of these variables. This is why when we plant a seed, we know what will come out of the seed. This is why when we take a look at an object, when we take a look at water, when we take a look at hydrogen, when we take a look at oxygen, we know what its properties are. There is rules present within the creation. There is order present within creation. And we know that where there is order and structure and design, where there are lines that are clean, where there is intellectual thought put into something, someone was responsible for creating it. When we take a look at from another example, if we were to attack this subject from another aspect, we take a look at what is the popular terms in Arabic known as mumkinul wujud and wajibul wujud. And there's an entire philosophy behind this, that mumkinul wujud, something that is possible to exist, requires something to bring it into existence. In English we may consider this cause and effect. That everything that has the probability to exist needs something to bring it into existence. If we look at cause and effect the same way, every effect has a cause before it. And the chain continues, the silsila continues, until we say that there has to be something that started the chain. There has to be something that started the chain. And for example, in scientific terms, through atheists, they say this was the Big Bang. So okay, fine, it was the Big Bang. No problem. What caused the Big Bang? Where did the material come? What was the cause that put that effect into play? The same way when we take a look at it, mumkinul wujud, everything is possible to exist. Anything that you can imagine is possible to exist. But there has to be something that must exist to bring everything else into existence. This is known as wajibul wujud. And the only thing that fits the category of wajibul wujud is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Meaning that, again, we agree, the chandelier, the light it can exist. But there has to be someone who makes light. Okay, who's the one who makes the light? The man makes the light. Who makes the man? His father. Who makes him? His father. Who makes him? Who taught him? Where did he learn? All of these different aspects, we see that they're all possible to exist. They all have a structure within each other that can bring it into existence. But there has to be someone who starts this process. Who was it that created Adam then? Where did Adam come from? Where was that initial spark? Where was that structural thought? And all these questions bring us back to the idea that someone has to be there present. Don't let society fool you into thinking that this all happened by chance and by accident. The idea of atheism, if you take a look at it structurally, it exists within societies, especially those societies that are very complex and major urban populations. Why? Because in a major urban population, people begin to have the misgiving that they have control of all of the variables. Meaning you begin to think anything you want you can have, all you need is some money and you can go buy it. The reason you don't have something is you can't afford it or you don't want it. You think you have control over everything that is in your environment. But take a look at, for example, why is it that in poorer countries or more desolate places or more unadvanced, non-urban locations, people believe in God? The common theory on this is that those people are uneducated. The most educated people live in urban environments. This is why they move towards atheism. And people who live in poor rural environments, they believe in Allah or creationism and they believe in God. This is incorrect. The reason people in those areas believe in the presence of a creator, the reason that those people have the intellectual capacity to acknowledge that a God exists is because they realize they don't have control over anything. When, for example, you're a farmer, you go and you plant your seed, and then you wait. There's nothing you can do to make that grass grow or that plant grow. You come to the acknowledgement that there must be a higher power there that controls and is involved with bringing this plant to life. When, for example, you own your own business, and this is why business, our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, said there are 70 doors of worship, and the best of those doors of worship is to work, is to have employment. And the best form of employment is to own your own business. Why? Because, for example, when we have a job, we assume that our rizq, our income is associated with that our boss will be pleased with us, he will give us a paycheck. We assume we will come to work and the boss, he will see us at work and he will pay us, so we count on our boss. But when you own your own business, you go and you open the door to your shop and you sit down. That's it. Now you make dua that Allah will send the customer. Allah will send someone. You realize what is in your control and what is not in your control. And every businessman realizes this. He realizes that beyond me doing the best that I can and putting forth my wares and opening my shop and maybe advertising, there's nothing else I can do. If Allah sends rizq, He sends rizq. You see, this is why within our society, our culture is currently breeding this concept of atheism, and we have to be aware of it. We have to constantly be in the thought process, how do I prove to myself the existence of Allah? How do I see His signs in creation? When we take a look, for example, up until a number of years ago, they said that life doesn't exist in very deep waters or doesn't exist in very dark caves. Why? They said all life requires sunlight. All life requires light, because light gives plant health, then animals eat the plants, then bigger animals eat those plants, then bigger animals eat them, and then we eat them. So they said everything needs light. Everything has to have light. Then they went down into the deepest reaches of the oceans, and what did they find? Oh, there's no light here, but things exist. And they had to realize that their thought process was incorrect. They thought they had contained the ability of Allah to create to a limitation. And Allah showed them that no, you don't have the ability to limit me. I can create where I choose. I can create what I choose. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our next question comes, What does it mean when we say God is one? How can we know that there is only one God? Okay, if we acknowledge that somebody created this, why is it mandatory for us to acknowledge the fact that there is only one creator? Why is it significant for us to know that there is only one? Why can't there be multiples? And we see that the world has frequently fallen into this trap where they begin to think there are many creators, many different people created, many things created. Astaghfirullah, they become mushrikeen. They create partners with Allah. Shirkat karte hain. But we say that no, this is not possible. That to say that Allah is one has to have a definite meaning. When we see in the Quran Allah Himself, and He explains through an intellectual fashion. This is the beauty. Even though it's in the Quran, Allah says, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهِ لَفَسَدَتَا فَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَرْشِ عَمَّا يَصِفُونَ. Allah Himself says, He says that if there had been gods other than Allah, you would have seen discord in creation. And He says there is no discord in creation. Therefore, glory be to Allah, the Master of the throne. How? If we were to say that there were multiple gods, each God would have his sign in his creation. The first thing we would see is that Anbiya would have called to a different God. Yet we see that all of the Anbiya, 124,000 Anbiya, all called to the same God. Everyone called to one God. Not that their God is different and our God is different. No, they all call to the same one God. We also take a look and we see that unity in creation. When Allah says you would see fasad in it, you would see discord in it. Tell me something. If I was to be a creator, why would my creation mimic the creation of another creator? Yet we see the whole world is built of atoms and elements. And these elements have different structures, but they have the ability to work together. We have the ability to create compounds within elements. There's no such thing that there exists something other than an atom, that all creation is based out of this thing and not out of atoms, and that it disagrees and that there's discord between these two. You would see a fight between these two creators to say that this is the creation of one, this is the creation of another. One would actively enforce you to combat another. Why wouldn't we see then that, for example, Shaitan, who fell out of favor with Allah, would be then calling out and saying, I am now a representative of this other God, and I call you to him. That God denied me, this God approves of me. Shaitan would be the first one. Yet Shaitan himself acknowledges that there is only one Allah, and I was a worshipper of Allah. And I worshipped Allah in such a fashion that there is no spot on this earth where he did not do sujood. Shaitan's problem was not with Allah, it was with us. This is why he's constantly trying to mislead us and take us away from Allah. So this idea that there exists one God, there exists a very interesting narration and discussion from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. During the battle of Siffin. Now the battle of Siffin was one of the bloodiest battles in the history of Islam. It was the greatest civil war that happened within Islam within that generation, where some historical narrations narrate that over 30,000 Muslims were killed. 30,000, and some of the greatest ashab of Rasulullah were killed during that battle. And we see that during this battle and how bloody and severe it was, we see that a man from the army of Muawiyah comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he says, you people say that Allah is one. What do you mean by that? In the middle of a heated battle, a man comes and he questions. And we see when we take a look at this battle of Siffin, let me explain to you exactly how serious it was. Imam Ali had made his son Muhammad Hanafiya one of the generals, one of the leaders of the army. He had made him one of the leaders of the army. Now Muhammad Hanafiya is commanded by his father to enter and attack the enemy. They say that the attack and the battle was so severe, Muhammad Hanafiya hesitated from entering the battle. Now remember, Muhammad Hanafiya knows the position of his father, and he is amongst the bravest of the Arabs because he is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Muawiyah used to say, I fear from amongst certain members of Medina that I don't attack Medina, and Muhammad Hanafiya was one of those people that Muawiyah feared. Yet when Amir al-Mu'mineen commands him to enter the battle, Muhammad Hanafiya hesitates. In some narrations it says because of the number of arrows they were shooting at him was so great he didn't dare to enter. A second time Amir al-Mu'mineen commanded him, enter the battle. And Muhammad Hanafiya, because of the severity of the battle, how severe the battle of Siffin was, hesitated. The third time, again, Amir al-Mu'mineen commands him, he hesitates. This is to show you how serious this battle was, that the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen hesitated from following the command of his father, though he was an incredibly brave man. Yet we take a look and we look at Karbala and we look at Abbas alayhi salam, that no matter how severe the battle was, Abbas alayhi salam was never one to delay entering the battle on the command of his brother. This is why Amir al-Mu'mineen had selected his mother Fatima bint Asad for her bravery. al-Baneen for her bravery. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in this battle of Siffin, which is a very serious battle, we see that this question is asked. And before we answer this question, or we see Imam Ali's answer to this question, the thing we have to ask is, weren't the soldiers of Muawiyah also Muslim? Why would a Muslim be asking Imam Ali that you people say Allah is one? What do you mean by this? When we take a look and we see that these people, the army of Muawiyah was raised from Sham. Sham was a country that had been conquered during the time of the first and second Khalifa. And then the rulership over Sham was given first to Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, and when he died, it was given to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. These people became Muslim under the hands of Muawiyah. They learned about Islam through Muawiyah. They thought the best example of Islam was Muawiyah. This is why we see that they had such animosity towards the Ahlul Bayt. This is why we see that they thought that they were such bad people amongst the Ahlul Bayt, because the people who taught them Islam taught them an inappropriate, incorrect version of Islam, to where the extent that the one fighting Imam Ali asks, what does it mean when you say Allah is one? And we see the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, when they hear this question, they start to berate this man and say, are you foolish? Such a severe battle and you're asking this question? Such a severe battle and you have the audacity to bring about this conversation? What kind of a fool are you? And we see Imam Ali's reaction, he says, shh, stop. This is the question because we are fighting. If they would have understood the answer to this question, they wouldn't be fighting me right now. Meaning that with Tawheed, with a better understanding of Tawheed, you understand the daraja and the status of the Ahlul Bayt. You put things in their proper position. So Amir al-Mu'mineen answers him. He says, this meaning of when we say Allah is one, Allahu Ahad, has four meanings, two of which are correct and two of which are incorrect. The two which are incorrect is to say that He, Allah, is one as in a number, that there is a second like Him or a third like Him. This is impossible. There can be no one like Allah, which is why to say that He is one and that there is a number two or a number three after Him is impossible. The second meaning, which is incorrect, is to say that He, Allah, is one as if in the type of a genus or species. To say that He, Allah, is one, then there are zebras, then there are cows, and then... No. This is also incorrect. To say that there is another thing that He could be categorized in, or there is a category within which Allah fits. This is impossible. The two meanings which are correct when we say that He, Allah, is one, is to say He is one as in He is unique. There is nothing else in existence or creation or imaginable that could ever be anything like Allah. The next meaning which is correct is to say that He, Allah, is one, is in that He has no parts. He is a unified entity. There is no subsection to His being. There is no, as the Christians have made a trinity, that God has three parts. This is also incorrect. So when you say Allah is one, acknowledge that His unique nature is such that there are no parts within Him, that there is none other like Him. There can be nothing against which He can be compared, and there is nothing like Him that could be considered another category similar to Him. This is what we mean when we talk about Allah is one. And this is the aspect that we have to consider and we have to think about. And when we say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, we have to acknowledge this aspect. That this ahad is not a simple concept. It does not mean the first thing that pops in our mind, but it means a very unique characteristic. It means a unique feature of Allah that is only in His characteristics. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll do one final question, and then inshallah we'll continue tomorrow's conversation with starting with the conversation, does Allah have a body? And how we intellectually come to the conclusion He doesn't. But first, why is it important to know God? Why is it significant? Okay, fine, He created me, but why do I have to know Him? Whenever we do something, you and I as individuals, there's a purpose to it. Sometimes that purpose is to have fun, sometimes that purpose is to make money, sometimes that purpose is to make our lives comfortable, sometimes that purpose, as in now inshallah hopefully, is to educate ourselves or to sit with our brothers and sisters. But there is a purpose to every action. To deny that Allah exists or not to approach that aspect, we deny the fact that Allah created us with a purpose. And He tells us what our purpose is. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn and mankind except to worship me. Meaning that you and I, our entire purpose of creation is to worship Allah. That's why He created us. How can we worship someone who we don't know exists or is present or not? Mahal, it's impossible. We have to first know that He is there, then we can worship Him. And Allah is so merciful. You take a look and you see the previous ummah that used to come in times of the other anbiya, the aspect of worship was very different. There are some creations or some people that Allah had sent the Nabi to whose job was to pray 100 rakats a day. Some people had to pray constantly throughout the day. Some people's worship was given in a very specific fashion, to the extent where, for example, in the Bani Israel, in the Yahud, when something became najis, to cleanse it, to purify it, you had to cut it off. You take a look at the Shari'iyah of Ummah Muslimah, of Ali Muhammad, you take a look and you see for us, Allah made it very easy. He made first off najasat. Thank God we don't have to cut anything off. You can simply wash it with water and you can make yourself pure again. You don't have to cut things off. And He made it, He said that the best of ibadat for you and the best of actions in which you worship me is to think and to ponder and to use your intellect correctly. 1 hour of thought is better than 1,000 hours of prayer. I'm not telling you don't have to pray. You still have to pray. But that aspect of being thoughtful and utilizing your intellect and thinking about Allah is so valuable to Him. And He made it an act of worship for us. He made taking care of your family an act of worship for us. He made taking care of your spouse an act of worship. He made earning a living an act of worship. All of these things to facilitate for us that if we are cognizant of Him and acknowledge Him and live our life in the aspect that we realize our purpose of creation is His worship, He rewards us for it. Meaning we can never be absent from the mercy of Allah. We can never be absent from this aspect that we should be cognizant of Him and be aware of Him. And that He is constantly aware of us and He is constantly the one who guides us and gives us mercy. Let's end again our session inshallah with a recitation of Dua Faraj and head to prayer then. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. And please recite a Fatiha for the sponsor of today's majlis as well too.